Hi, everyone, and welcome to Grounding Session. I'm really excited to host this workshop today. This is a workshop that I actually thought about creating in the beginning of the pandemic, and it just didn't come together then. And I think it's just as important and applicable in our time now. So I hope that this is going to be a really awesome workshop for you guys, and is going to introduce you to a few new things that you can do to increase the grounding and calmness and centeredness that you have in your life. So we had the live call this morning, and I decided not to record it to make it a little bit more intimate and private for the women who did show up live, because I really wanted us to have the opportunity to chat and really talk and share in that call. And so I decided to just record the workshop for you separately now. I hope that this is going to be a really great and wonderful resource for you for now and going forward. We're going to cover three things today. So first, I'm going to do a grounding meditation. And I think that this is a really good one. I use this all the time when I feel like I want to feel more grounded. In my life, it's a meditation that you can do before going to bed, when you wake up in the morning. You can even do this while you're outside on a walk, for instance, while you wait for your kids to pick them up from school, wherever really. This is when you're on the train, commuting, wherever. And so I really like this grounding meditation, and I'm excited to share that with you today. The next thing we're going to talk about is I'm going to share with you simple practices that can increase the groundedness that you feel in your life and can kind of like bring more grounding energy into your life. These are practices that I utilize a lot in my work as a health and life coach. Specifically, these are a little bit more health coach based, because I talk a lot about these practices with women who come to see me because they feel really burnt out, women who have adrenal fatigue or other hormonal issues that are rooted in exhaustion and stress. And so I think these are really important and useful things for us to even include in our simple lives, like even if we're not burned out or completely exhausted. I think these are practices that we can utilize simply to feel more grounded and to calm our nervous system and calm our bodies a little bit. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is an exercise. I'm going to teach you a method I developed called the ABCD method. And this is a method that you can utilize to navigate your way through overwhelm, anxiety, and stress, and to feel more grounded, calm, and centered again. In this exercise, one thing I really love about it is that it puts you back into a position of power, versus feeling like stress and overwhelm and all the layers of life are kind of just like twirling you around and you're like completely losing your ground underneath you. So those are the three things that we're going to do in this workshop. And I always welcome questions. If anything comes up afterwards, you can email me. And I'm always happy to chat about and offer more advice as you're learning about these things that I'm going to teach you today. So before we do that, I know that most of you are familiar with me. I looked at the list of women who have signed up for this workshop, and I recognized a lot of names. So a lot of you already know me. But for those of you who are not so familiar with me, I am an integrative coach and a well-being mentor. That means integrative coach because I'm combining life coaching and health coaching into the way that I look at women's lives, the way I support women who are in my practice. I also have a background in psychology. I have a master's in counseling psychology and focus the bulk of my studies on dream analysis, really understanding the unconscious, understanding family patterns, family dynamics. And then I wrote my master thesis on women and the mind-body connection, specifically how we can use the awareness of certain sensations in our bodies to help us heal in our emotional and mental lives. I loved all the things I've gotten to study, whether that's my master's program, the life coaching, or the health coaching that's specifically about women's hormonal health. And I think it's so powerful to combine those different methodologies and aspects into one thing. And so that's also what I do today. So I basically like support women who feel really heavy under the layers of their lives. And they are women usually who really crave harmony, who really crave joy, who really want to thrive in their lives, but they just feel like there are too many things resting on their shoulders, too many responsibilities, and they can't really get in touch with themselves. And they feel like a lot of times like they've kind of lost themselves and they don't really like know who they are or what they want and how to then navigate their lives in a way that really allows them to come to fruition. And so personally, so that's what I do professionally. Personally, I'm also a mom of 3 kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an almost 2-year-old. They keep me super busy. I'm also a wife. I'm a wellness enthusiast, nature lover. I love food. I love being outside. And then I'm also a hobby painter. So there's a lot of different things going on in my life. And so I'm constantly practicing the things that I'm going to talk about today to you as well, because I think it's really important to have a solid grounding practice and awareness for grounding in your life in order to be able to like do all the things that we want to do, not just quickly, but well. And this is sort of a big realization I had about 2 years ago when I had my daughter, my 3rd child, is that I don't really care so much anymore about doing a lot of things, but that I care much more about doing less things, but doing those things really well. And that I get a lot of satisfaction and pride in my life from feeling like I'm really doing things well. And so in order to do that, it's really, really important to have this grounding and to feel connected to yourself and connected to your life. And that's really why grounding matters, right? Like I think all of us need grounding and need stability in our lives so that we can do the things we want to do with intention and our full presence and our full energy. And that's how we feel fulfilled in our lives. And ultimately, I think that's what we all want, is this fulfillment. Okay, so let's start with our grounding exercise. So this grounding exercise is, yeah, let's just get started and you'll see what it is. So let's close our eyes and you can make sure your legs are uncrossed and your feet are on the ground. And then I want you to take your arms and just kind of like lift them above your body and do a little stretch all the way down, and then allow your arms to just kind of like hang by your side. I mentioned earlier that this is sort of like a meditation you can also do when you are really when you're anywhere, even when you're outside on a walk, in which case you probably wouldn't close your eyes, but you'll see what I mean as we're getting into the meat of this meditation. So let your arms kind of like dangle by your side and just tune into what it feels like to have gravity pull on your fingertips gently. I think many of us are so busy and we are really operating our life from the chest up, right? Our arms are constantly in use. If you're a mom like me, I'm constantly carrying and schlepping someone or their stuff around. And so I can feel a lot of tension in my shoulders and in my neck, as well as in my forehead. I know a lot of us can resonate with that. Many of us also experience tension behind our eyes and on our forehead, specifically because we're trying to see things and trying to look at the computer and read the next email and think about the next thing and check off the to-do list. So much of our energy can happen in our upper body, in our head, in our neck, in our forehead, behind our eyes. And so see if you can kind of let all of that just kind of melt down. And take a gentle breath in through your nose. I personally prefer breathing in and out of my nose. I've done a lot of research recently on nose breathing versus mouth breathing, and the findings are staggering. So I always now recommend focusing and practicing breathing through your nose. And so just allow this gentle gravity to pull on your fingertips and soften your arms and bring relaxation into your shoulders. You're not holding anything right now. You're just letting it go. And then I would love for you to shift your awareness into your ears and pay attention to what you are hearing. You're obviously hearing my voice. What else are you detecting? And if it's silence and quiet in between my voice, what does it feel like to your ears to just have quiet around you? And then shift your awareness over to your nose and what you can smell. So we're engaging your senses. You might want to breathe in through your nose and just pay attention to what smells you can detect. This is a little bit trickier in our own home. That's why this is a beautiful exercise to do when you're out walking. For instance, you can really pay attention to all the smells around you. And having that solo focus just on smelling. Solo focus in general is so relaxing to our mind and to our body. The opposite of multitasking. And then shift your awareness to your taste. What do you taste? Maybe you still have a little bit of leftover breakfast taste or coffee taste or tea taste. And just pay attention to what that can you taste. Again, this is an exercise that you can do even while you're maybe having a snack or something, and to really be mindful about your taste and what something tastes like. So much satisfaction is hiding there when we really pay attention to one scent or one sense, one of our senses, instead of trying to take in all of them and also do other things at the same time. And then next, we're going to shift your attention to feeling. You can either see what it feels like to have your feet planted on the ground. What does it feel like? If your hands are still, or your arms are still hanging down to your side, you can also gently touch your fingertips and rub them against each other. And what does that feel like? What do your fingertips feel like? Are they soft? Are they cool? Are they warm? Are they sticky? What does it feel like? And then next, you can gently, very gently open your eyes and just kind of gaze around you and see what you can see. Maybe you find something that you find particularly beautiful or interesting, something that makes you curious. And you just pay attention to that. And then we're going to take a breath in through our nose and out through our nose again. And we'll bring our arms up and do a big circle around. Bring a little bit of energy back into our body. So this is a beautiful practice, but it's, again, so simple. I know a lot of people have a hard time with meditation, and I don't think that we have to wait for ourselves to be pro meditators in order to reap the benefits of meditation. You know, I think it's obviously something that's worth practicing, but it's really exercises like this that I think are so much easier accessible for those of us who maybe haven't practiced meditation or have had a hard time with meditation. And so you also don't have to do all five senses each time, right? Like you can, maybe when you're in line to pick up your kids, maybe you just focus on all the things you can see around you and really explore them, versus maybe being on your phone while you're waiting or whatever it is, or you pick your hearing, right? Like, what do you hear? And that can be such a grounding experience because you're completely present in the moment. So use your senses to ground you is basically the gist of this grounding exercise. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about simple practices that can help you with grounding. These principles often come up in, again, conversations with clients who are suffering from burnout, adrenal fatigue, or other hormonal issues that are rooted in exhaustion or stress. Or even things like chronic inflammation and things like that. I think a lot of our issues that we're experiencing, not just mentally and emotionally, but physically, are often rooted in this issue that we're constantly going. And all of our energy is so airy and up here that we forget to actually drop into our body and reap the benefits from being grounded and quieter in our bodies, but also in our lives. And so with this action, with this point, I'm drawing a little bit more on my health coaching background. And these are kind of just like simple tips. I think it's always, when we really want to do something, I think it's always good to have practices that are focused on your body, that are practical action steps that you can take. And then in our next step, we're going to talk more about like a mental exercise that you can do in order to understand your triggers and your stressors better, and how you can go from feeling kind of like twirled around by those into a more intentional and focused way of creating more grounding in your life. So I'll talk about the more practical health coaching type of pieces now, and we'll start with food. So eating grounding foods, what does that mean? It means a lot of warming foods, root vegetables. Again, they come from the ground, from the earth. They have much more grounding energy than, say, an apple or something that grows up in the air, right? Like we want to literally eat foods that are more in the earth, that are really more grounded. So warm meals come with that, root vegetables, slow cooked meats or veggies. If you do well with grains, which I know not everybody is, see if you can eat them warm and softened versus like having really crunchy, hard foods. Is much harder for our digestive system. So people who are very anxious and heady and have a lot of stress in their lives and have maybe like adrenal issues, it's really important to give your body a break. And it's much easier for your body to digest foods that are really well cooked versus raw things. And then herbs that are really good include basil, chives, coriander, dill, fennel, parsley, and rosemary. And spices that have grounding energy include anise, cumin, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and black pepper. So all of these herbs and spices are also in the category of things that support your digestive system, that are allowing you to extract nutrients from your food very easily, which is something that we need when we're running on high stress and need a little bit more calming and grounding energy. And then the most unpopular thing I can probably say is also to stay away from coffee and caffeinated drinks, as well as alcohol and sugar. So those are three things that I've seen in my practice of people who have intense anxiety and stress, a lot of times also consume the most caffeine and the most sugar, probably to cope with the stress, because they need the quick energy and they need the quick sort of like awareness and like sharpened senses that coffee can sometimes deliver us, but it usually always backfires and just taxes your adrenals even more. And so I really want to emphasize that if you are somebody who already feels very flighty and very anxious and very overwhelmed, see if you can stay away from caffeine, alcohol, and sugar, even just for a little while, or reduce it to doing more decaf or more tea or whatever else it is that you like having. I think that you're really not doing your body any favors if it's already stressed and you're pushing it even more into overdrive. And the same is true for exercise. So think about the energy that your movement, the way you move your body, what kind of energy does that have? So if you're already in a place of overwhelming stress, how do you choose exercises that can counterbalance what you're already experiencing in your life? So that would be more walking, yoga, Pilates, stretching, those kinds of things. And for those of you who really like exercises like CrossFit, it's okay to do those too, but have days where you do more of these sort of like grounding exercises that allow your whole entire stress response system to just quiet down a little bit and slow down a little bit. I think that this is really, really important to kind of think about the balance of things. Like if you're already feeling one way that's not really serving you, how can you choose foods and activities and the way or body movements that are practicing the balancing muscles of rooting you, calming you down, quieting things a little bit. And then the third thing is breath. So we already talked a little bit about that earlier, but a lot of people are shallow mouth breathers. So that makes your mouth really, really dry, number one. And dryness is not good for a grounding, for grounding energy. And it also is really shallow. A lot of times, like when we breathe in through our mouth, it just kind of like goes through here. And sometimes we can force it a little bit lower versus breathing in through your nose. Can feel really, really calming and more cleansing, right? Like our breath has a huge cleansing function in our life. And so I think that this is such a powerful tool to keep. If you are somebody who feels really stressed, making sure that your inhale is a little bit shorter than your exhale, or your exhale is a little bit longer than your inhale, is one of the fastest and easiest way to calm your nervous system down. And to feel a little bit more grounded and rooted. It's a really, really beautiful practice. I actually also do this practice with my kids. And the earlier we can teach our children and the next generation these kinds of tools, the better, right? So when my kids are having whatever, a meltdown about something, I always do these breathing exercises with them. And I tell them, breathe in through your nose, and then breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your nose as well, but longer. And it really helps them. I mean, I think it's incredible how effective these tools are. And we can see that when we offer them to children who maybe don't have so much mental opposition to practices like this. We can really see the magic of these practices unfolding. Okay, so this was that. And if you have any questions about this, these 3 points that I made, and also, by the way, there's a lot more we could be talking about when it comes to adrenal fatigue, burnout, and all these things. But I think these 3 are really, really important ones that are also relatively easy to incorporate into your life to help you with grounding and reducing the anxiety and stress that you feel in your life. So I wanted to offer those 3 specifically. But if you have any questions about these, please let me know. I'm happy to answer questions that you have about this workshop through email as well. So don't be shy. Okay, next we're going to talk about my ABCD method. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper on this one, and I'm going to provide an example for you about what I mean with this exercise or with this methodology. So it's really, the reason I developed it is because it's a simple way for you to navigate your way out of overwhelm, anxiety, stress, and help you feel more grounded and centered and calm, and really feel also like you're in charge of things versus being kind of like whipped around by all the layers of stress and thoughts in your life. And so I recommend doing this activity and going through ABCD with each of the things that stress you in your life. Having kind of like like peeling all the layers apart and doing this exercise for each of the things that stress you. And I'll provide an example for how I'm applying these with something that's stressful for me in my life at this point, or at this very moment in time. Okay, so so I'll guide you through the ABCD and what they stand for. So A stands for assessment. So in this category, or in this step, I want you to think about or journal about what is fueling your stress your anxiety, your worry, your overwhelm. What are the things that are throwing you off? What are your triggers? And what's ungrounding you? And again, there's probably a couple of things that are doing this in your life, but write them down one at a time and then go through BCD with each of them. B stands for boundary. So what kind of boundary do you need to implement to give yourself space to breathe and to keep stress at a manageable level, right? Like we all need boundaries. And by the way, these boundaries can be physical or mental, emotional boundaries. So we can have physical boundaries with like a certain situation or a person or a boss or a job or whatever. We can have those types of more physical boundaries. And then mental, emotional boundaries are with our own thoughts, with our own outlook. How am I seeing a certain situation? How am I explaining a certain event to myself? And do I need a boundary with how my thoughts are going? And I'll give an example of that as well. So, and also an analogy I really like for boundaries is, I think sometimes people think of a boundary as like you need walls and like something isn't working and you just need to throw up a wall and like keep all that stuff out. And I actually like the analogy of a fence much better, because over a boundary, you can't communicate anymore. And with certain people and situations, maybe you need a wall, but for most things in our lives, we actually just need a boundary that looks more like a fence, right? And there's a gate and we can open the gate when we want to, and we can close the gate, we can still communicate over it, but it's not like the situation can't like come rushing in at all times, or this person can't come rushing in and like taking over whatever we've got going on completely whenever they want to. So I like this analogy of a boundary being like a beautiful fence that you get to decide when it's open and when it's closed, because you're in charge. So C stands for clarity. And the clarity that I want you to gain is, what do you need to feel grounded, calm, and centered? So in the face of whatever stress you're experiencing, what do you need to feel grounded, calm, and centered, right? And then D stands for do it, right? So it's not enough to just have the clarity of what we need, but we also need to follow through on it. And consistency here is key. So I'd rather have you pick like a small thing that you can do, but you can do it consistently, versus coming up with an idealistic master list of stuff you could be doing that is just too much. And so you'll never end up doing it and you won't actually make any progress. Like nothing's going to materialize or change in your real world, because your goals or your ambitions just aren't in line with the season that you're in. And so I really want you, like, if you want to come up with a big master list of all the things that you need in order to feel grounded and calm and centered, that's fine. And then take a highlighter and highlight like 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you can actually do consistently that you can truly commit to. So this is really, really important to not just have the realization in your mind, but also figure out how you can actually do this in your real life, right? That's how we're going to see change. Okay, so I'm going to guide you through a quick example of something that is really stressing me. So one of the things that has really fueled my anxiety, and one of the reasons why I also decided to offer this grounding workshop at this time, is because of this whole terrible situation in the Ukraine, right? Like for me, that has been a really, really big stressor in my life. And I want to mention it today because everybody I talk to also feels really stressed and worried about it. And so I want to talk you through this ABCD concept of what I've realized I needed for myself at this time to not get caught up in this perpetual overwhelm that has me just, doubting life on earth, basically. Okay, so my assessment of what's fueling my stress, anxiety, worry, and overwhelm, and what is really throwing me off and triggering me and ungrounding me, is that there is such immense suffering. The enormity of the conflict and its possible repercussions are so big that I start to feel really helpless and like almost like a little bit panicky, right? Like, oh my God, like there's like nothing in my power besides obviously like donating and all that, which I think is a really important thing to do. But there's not really that much that's in my control. So I start to feel really helpless. And then that's what's kind of like triggering me and starting to really fuel this anxiety and overwhelm in my life. And so for me, when I think about what boundary do I need, there have been times when I've blocked out the news completely, but that doesn't feel appropriate in this particular scenario because I think it's important for me to be informed and to continue to find ways in which I can be helpful. So blocking it out completely isn't appropriate for me with this particular issue. So I need a different boundary. So for me, the boundary that I've decided on needing with this particular issue is that I'm not consuming news in the second half of the day. Like if I read stuff before I go to bed, I'm guaranteed to not sleep very well. And in the evening and at night, especially, my anxiety has a much, much easier time turning into a bigger current and a bigger wave. So considering that's important for me to stay informed, for me, I read the news in the morning. And boundary number 2 is I'm not just consuming news from whoever is like throwing stuff at me. I pick a specific news source, and that is what I read. So in other words, what that means is, and I'll get to that with clarity and do it. But for example, like I'll reach into those really quickly. But what that means is that I can't spend all that much time on Instagram or social media platforms in general, especially like later in the day, because news are everywhere. Everybody's talking about it, which is great. Again, like we want that awareness, but I need a few more boundaries for myself so that I can still stay grounded and operate in my life and show up for the people who I love in a way that is constructive and healthy, right? Like nobody benefits if I'm a complete mess, you know? Okay, so then the clarity piece. So the clarity question is, what do you need to feel grounded, calm, and centered? And so for me, what I realized is I'm overwhelmed by the enormity of the conflict and the global issue. And so I need to have something that have the ability especially in the afternoons to make my world smaller and to kind of like rein it in. And so what that means for me is that we make the afternoons about like our small sort of like immediate life. And I think kids are actually like helpful in that because they're so hyper present, but being really, really present. So that's kind of like what I need. This is the clarity I'm having is for what I need in order to feel grounded and calm and centered is to make my world a little bit smaller for part of the day where I'm not focused or thinking about the big picture, the global issues, the enormity of whatever conflict is happening. And so when it comes to the do it, what is my action step? What is my follow through? What is something that I can be consistent with? And this is, for example, phone-free afternoons or having very limited access to my phone and definitely no social media in the afternoons or evenings. Choosing to spend time in nature, right? And like being outside, engaging my senses like we just did in this little meditation and the grounding meditation that I guided you through. And then making my home peaceful and beautiful and like really focusing on the tasks that are like literally around me. Reading a light novel at the end of the day versus like drama of some sort at the end of the day. And then my husband and I started doing a puzzle instead of like watching TV in the evening or watching a show. We started doing puzzles or playing a game at the end of the evening, which again like pulls our presence into this like being together versus like being present with like the TV and the characters that are like that don't even exist, you know? And so those are all things that I can do consistently that are fostering more groundedness and calmness and centeredness in my life. So that's one example. I had another example prepared, but I'm running a little bit out of time. But maybe I'll run you through it really quick because I think this is one that might also be applicable to many of your lives. So another thing that is fueling my stress and my overwhelm in my life is balancing life with 3 kids and a job and a husband and hobbies that I really love pursuing. And so keeping all that balanced is a challenge, right? Like it's not something that just kind of like automatically happens. It requires intention and foresight and just work in terms of being clear about what it is that I need in order to do the things that I choose to do well, which again is one of my priorities in this season of my life, and probably actually for the rest of my life, because I think it feels much better to do less things and do those things really, really well versus doing a lot of things kind of sort of struggling through them. So the assessment is that when I feel like I always have to be on, I get really impatient. I start to feel trapped. I'm starting to lack freedom and flexibility. When I feel like I'm always in service to somebody else, it's easy for me to kind of like lose touch with myself. And that's when, again, like I get impatient, I get frustrated so much quicker. Yeah, I just don't show up the way that I want to show up in my life for the people who I love the most, you know? And so this is my assessment, right? Like when I feel like I always have to be on, I feel really stressed and overwhelmed and anxious. And so what boundaries do I need? So what kind of boundaries do I need to implement to give myself room to breathe and to keep that kind of like stress at a manageable level? So there's two boundaries, right? Boundary number one is the physical boundary. How much of my time is scheduled, right? So I can look at my calendar and I can say, okay, here are all of my like client calls. Here's like stuff I have to do for my work as a coach that are not just coaching, but sort of like administrative and behind the scenes type of work to keep my business going. Here are all the times when I am with the kids, when I pick them up from school, all the things. Is there time for me to be creative? Is there time for me to be outside in nature and exercise and move my body? Those two things have to be in there. I know at this point in my life, if there don't have space in my calendar, I'm not going to show up the way that I really want to show up. These are things that I really have to honor about myself because they nourish me and they feed me and they make me a person who I actually really enjoy being. So this is like a physical boundary that I need, right? Like, what do I need to say no to so that I can for sure fit these creativity and movement pieces into my life that are essentially really grounding and connecting practices for the person that I am. And yours is different, right? Like you don't have to say like this is not going to be true for everybody, but these are what I have identified are really key important things for me. So for example, like a physical boundary I put in place, and this is a couple of years ago now, then because this has been obviously an ongoing source of potential overwhelm as I've added more kids to the mix. But a couple of years ago, I used to squeeze in clients in the evening, right? Like if somebody couldn't make their call, I'd be like, oh, no problem. I'll, come and see you at 7 or 8 or whatever time. And I no longer do that. It doesn't serve my energy in the evening. A lot of times I do get to be creative. I do get to be up here in my office and paint. Sometimes I do a little yoga session in the evening, but that's my time. And so I've put more boundaries in place that I'm not so easily willing to topple. And that's really important. And also actually asks for a lot of courage. It wasn't easy for me to put these boundaries in place because I'm naturally a people pleaser. I like when people like me, when I'm able to meet somebody where they want me to meet them. And so I've had to learn over time in my life to put boundaries in place to protect my own well-being. So this is a physical boundary. The mental boundary that I also realized I needed to put in place is when, for example, my kids are like off school suddenly, right? Like suddenly there's a snow day and everyone's going to be home, or somebody gets sick and they end up being home for like the rest of the week. It's so easy for my mind to start to spiral of like, oh my God, like all of this, like they're going to be home. I won't be able to do anything. I won't be able to like go outside on my quiet walks. I won't have time to paint. All my work is going to fall behind and my mind starts to spiral. So here's where I need a boundary with my mind, right? Of saying, stop. I'm not going to allow myself to spiral. I'm not going to allow the spiral actually to take over my thoughts and unground me into this sort of like tornado that's then just not serving anybody. What can I do to ground myself back into the values of this season of my life, which include things like being present, right? Having harmony, managing situations well, again, like doing less, So then what does that mean? So if I have that boundary and that mental boundary where I can say stop to a certain spiral that is kind of like taking over my thoughts, how can I reinstate through action steps, and we'll get to those, a way of managing that week that really grounds me back into my values, right? Okay, so, and my priorities, which my kids are my priority. So when they're sick, yeah, like I have a bunch of stuff I need to figure out and like shuffle around and stuff and talk to my husband about and manage with our two schedules and stuff like that. But I've done it before and I know I can figure it out, right? So this is also, I think, something that's so important when it comes to these like mental boundaries. And when we start to spiral and like start to almost like freak out and panic in our own mind, how can we come back to this point of trust that really lives in our lower belly of saying, I got this and we're gonna figure it out. You know, like really having that trust and believe in yourself that things are going to be fine. And it might take a little while to get from the spiraling to that more calm, embodied feeling of like, it'll be fine and we got this, right? It doesn't have to go as quickly as I just described it. Usually it doesn't go that quickly for me either. It takes me, you know, like an hour or two to come down from the spiral, and that's okay. That's normal, right? Like give yourself that space. So the clarity that comes from that. So what do I need to feel grounded, calm, and centered again? So what I need is a reminder of this realization I had about 2 years ago that I'd rather do less and do the things that I am doing well. So here are the things that I won't have a choice, right? Like my kids are going to be home for whatever reason. And I want to do that really well. I want to go back to the basics, really keep things simple. And ground myself again into these values of this season. So how can we as a family still go out and exercise or out and into nature and have some time outside? How can we have creativity, right? Like my kids love painting and all those things. Like maybe it doesn't look the way I want it to look when I'm just on my own, but how can I share those types of activities with them during that time? And then don't overcommit to things that feel draining, right? So during these times when there's an extra layer of stress, how can I not overcommit to things that I kind of already know are going to drain my energy, right? So being really aware of your energy drainers and your energy fuelers and seeing where you can set these boundaries with energy drainers, I think is really, really important. So, and then of course, who can you call on for support, right? And then like doing it and like consistently having conversations about how you manage unexpected situations when all the kids are going to stay home, so that you and whoever is there in your support system can be more like a well-oiled machine versus like, oh my God, someone's home. What are we going to do now? And the frenzy begins, right? So being really mindful and intentional about the things that you know cause stress in your life, right? Like these things aren't unexpected, right? Like kids get sick, kids stay home, unexpected things happen, but how can you prepare for those moments so that it doesn't feel like a complete overwhelm spiral every single time? Okay, so these are the two examples I wanted to give you. And then I prepared 3 sentences for you to kind of apply this exercise. But I'm going to email these to you so you can finish them. And also I'm going to send you this ABCD and the questions that I have associated with it. I think this is, again, like an excellent exercise to take yourself through if you feel frazzled, overwhelmed, anxious, and you want to pull apart the layers of stress in your life. And you can go through this ABCD exercise with each one of your stressors and understand, really, really understand what boundaries you need and what you want to do instead to increase the grounding and centering and calming energy in your life. All right. So that brings us to the end of our workshop. It was a little bit quicker than the live workshop because this is a recording and we didn't have any interactive conversations on here. But I still hope that you found this really helpful. And I would love to hear how you liked it, if you have any questions about it, if there's maybe something else that you would want me to elaborate a little bit more in a future newsletter or blog post or whatever. I'm always super, super happy to get advice, to get insights into how the material that I offer arrives and sits with you. This is how I can learn and get better and provide better resources for you along the way as well. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And oh, one more thing. I like to pick cards or pull cards just in general in life, but I pulled one before this workshop today. And I asked, what do the women on this workshop need to know? What kind of a reminder do they need? And I picked Athena. She's the one that came up. And she's the goddess of inner wisdom. And she says, you know what to do. Trust your inner wisdom and take appropriate action without delay. And I love that she came up for us because I think that this is really true. I think that we all really deep down know what we need and know what we want in our life. It's just sometimes really easy to feel disconnected from that. So really trust that you know what is best for you. Trust that the life that you want to lead and the life that you want to create is available for you, right? I think this is so important. I think out of all the things that we can do, if we don't have that trust and that faith that what we want is available to us and that we actually know what we need and that we can trust ourselves, is so fundamental in order to create a thriving life, in order to create beauty and harmony and good relationships and joy. All of those things, I think, are really deeply dependent on us just having this faith in ourselves and life. All right, so with that, goodbye and thank you for listening.